Hello, my name is Lloyd Price. I'd like to share with you the story of the boy who didn't believe in spring. This is an illustrated book by Lucille Clifton with pictures by Brinton Turkle. This is a Puffin Books publication. Once upon a time, there was a little boy named King Shabazz who didn't believe in spring. No such thing, he would whisper every time the teacher talked about spring in school. Where's that? He would holler every time his mama talked about spring at home. He used to sit with his friend Tony Polito on the bottom step when the days started getting longer and warmer and talk about it. Everybody talking about spring, he would say. Big deal, Tony would say. No such thing, he would say to Tony. Right, Tony would say back. One day, after the teacher had been talking about birds that were blue and his mama had started talking about crops coming up, King Shabazz decided he had had enough. He put his jacket on and his shades and went by for Tony Polito. Look here, man, King said when they got out to the bottom step. I'm going to get me some of this spring. What do you mean, man? Tony asked him. Everybody talking about spring coming and spring just round the corner. I'm going to go round there and see what do I see. Tony Polito watched King Shabazz get up and push his shades up tight on his nose. You coming with me, man? He said while he was pushing. Tony Polito thought about it for a minute. Then he got up and turned his cap around backwards. Right, Tony Polito said back. King Shabazz and Tony Polito had been round the corner before, but only as far as the street light alone. They passed the school and the playground. Ain't no spring in there, said King Shabazz with a laugh. Sure ain't, agreed Tony Polito. They passed Wiseman's. They stopped for a minute by the side door at Wiseman's and smelled the buns. Sure do smell good, whispered Tony. But it ain't spring, King was quick to answer. They passed the apartments and walked fast in case they met Junior Williams. He had said in school that he was going to beat them both up. Then they were at the streetlight. Tony stopped and made believe his sneaker was untied to see what King was going to do. King stopped and blew on his shades to clean them to see what Tony was going to do. They stood there for 2 light turns, and then King Shabazz grinned at Tony Polito. And he grinned back. And the 2 boys ran across the street. Well, if we find it, it ought to be now, said King. Tony didn't say anything. He just stood looking around. Well, come on, man, King whispered, and they started down the street. They passed the Church of the Solid Rock, with high windows all decorated and pretty. They passed a restaurant with little round tables near the window. They came to a takeout shop and stood by the door a minute to smell the barbecue. Sure would like to have some of that, whispered King. Me too, whispered Tony with his eyes closed. They walked slower down the street. Just after they passed some apartments, King Shabazz and Tony Polito came to a vacant lot. It was small and had high walls from apartments on 3 sides of it. 3 walls rounded, and right in the middle, a car. It was beautiful. The wheels were gone, and so were the doors, but it was dark red and sitting high on a dirt mound in the middle of the lot. Oh man, whispered King. Oh man, whispered Tony. Then they heard the sound, the noise. Then they heard the noise. It was a little long sound, like smooth things rubbing against rough, and it was coming from the car. It happened again. King looked at Tony and grabbed his hand. Let's see what it is, man, he whispered. He thought Tony would say no and let's go home. Tony looked at King and held his hand tightly. Right, he said very slowly. The boy stood there a minute, then began tiptoeing over towards the car. They walked very slowly across the lot. When they were halfway to the car, Tony tripped and almost fell. He looked down and saw a patch of little yellow pointy flowers growing in the middle of short spiky green leaves. Man, I think you tripped on those crops, King laughed. They're coming up, Tony shouted. Man, the crops are coming up. And just as Tony was making all that noise, they heard another noise, like a lot of things waving in the air, and they looked over at the car, and 3 birds flew out of one of the door holes and up to the wall of the apartment. King and Tony ran over to the car to see where the birds had been. They had to climb up a little to get to the door and look in. They stood there looking a long time without saying anything. There, on the front seat, down in a whole lot of cottony stuff, was a nest. There in the nest were 4 light blue eggs. Blue. King took off his shades. Man, it's spring, he said almost to himself. Anthony Polito! King and Tony jumped down off the mound. Somebody was shouting for Tony as loud as he could. Anthony Polito! The boys turned and started walking out of the vacant lot. Tony's brother Sam was standing at the edge of the lot looking mad. Ma's gonna kill you after I get finished, you squirt, he hollered. King Shabazz looked at Tony Polito and took his hand. Spring is here, he whispered to Tony. Right, whispered Tony Polito back. The end. I hope you enjoyed the story of the boy who didn't believe in spring.